Hello everybody, here we are today and we're going to be talking about the Saskatchewan Roughriders and what their head coach Corey Mace should have for expectations in year one. So before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So yes, you have the Roughriders with a new head coach in Corey Mace after they moved on from Coach Dickinson, and Mace was the Toronto Argonauts defensive coordinator from 2022 through 2023. A short stint, but a very successful stint, ended with a Grey Cup championship and then one of the best seasons, tied for the best season in CFL history last year, and it ended in the Eastern Final, which was unfortunate. However, here he is in Saskatchewan looking to really build things up and hopefully make the Roughriders better than what they were in the past two seasons. So looking into this, what should we say are expectations for Mace and his team going forward? I think the biggest thing is just seeing this team improve, especially in the defensive side of the ball. They ended up allowing the most points per game defensively in the league last year. They also had the fewest sacks in the CFL last season, which was really frustrating. And then they also allowed the most rushing first downs in the league last year as well. So just cleaning things up and trying to make sure that their offense doesn't have to go out there and give you 35 points to win the game. And now there were some games that you could say, was it their offense with turnovers, or was it the fact that the defense was just getting torn up where the offense still had to play a factor in it? There was a couple games that were relatively close where the defense got lit up, but the offense was able to pull out the W. And that does kind of factor into what are we going to do to fix things defensively for a defensive coordinator or a former defensive coordinator. Sure would be a great way to do that. And even if they're not a top unit in the CFL next year, just not being dead last in the league for most points per game allowed and just fixing some of those things would be really good. And it remains to be seen if they can change. Now, I think for Mace, the great news is with what we saw with the Argos, he didn't necessarily have to have this unit that was going to be locked down and then be the first in the league for fewest points per game allowed. I don't think either of the two seasons that he was the defensive coordinator for Toronto, they were top of the league. In fact, last year I think they finished somewhere middle of the pack. One thing that I do think they really excelled in both seasons, if I'm not mistaken, was getting turnovers. I don't know about forced fumbles because that's a stat that I could not find on the CFL website, but in terms of interceptions, I was able to find that on another website. Just a team that was really good, and they had some ball hawks out there that could make things happen. Now, was part of that very skilled defensive line that they have? Yes, I do think that was part of it. In their linebacker core, that is, again, very good. But just getting to force the opposing quarterback to turn the ball over, or just getting forced fumbles, things like that, where you get the offense the ball back, you take away points that the other team could have got, and then you also kill time off the board, which could be a good thing if you're in a close game, are all going to be key factors here. This doesn't have to be a unit that goes out there and is allowing 17 points per game and is just shutting down the opposition the whole game. I think that if they could just be a team that maybe forced 1, 2, maybe 3 turnovers in a game here or there would be a really good thing to be able to get the Saskatchewan side back to where they need to be. And for Mace, maybe this is going to be the challenge he's looking forward to, because is this going to be as talented of a group as he had in Toronto on the defensive side of the ball? That remains to be seen, especially with free agency set to start in about a month. Now, speaking of free agency, this is going to be big too with the Roughriders. They are just like every team in the CFL. They have multiple guys that they just want to keep, but they might not necessarily be able to keep. But on top of that too, they have just a big list of players that if they lost them, you probably look at it and say, oh, I really wish they wouldn't have lost that player. So that is going to be something they have to figure out internally, how they could try to extend these guys before free agency hits, and maybe you get in a little bit of a bidding war for a player. Some of these receivers that they're going to be losing could be big losses. Sean Bain Jr., I really liked watching him last year. Is he going to be a fit again this year? Is he going to be as impactful? I guess that is something that we'll get to go out there and see, and I just wish we had more underlying numbers. But when I did get to watch them play, I really enjoyed getting to watch him play, and there's some other players as well that, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you would like to be able to see them retain to try to keep things going. Now, there are other things that we could switch off to and say this is what they have to improve with, and I would say just not getting lit up. I know we talked about points per game, and that was a big talking point. They had multiple games where they were just getting lit up. It wasn't like, oh, we went out here and we ended up just losing a game where we had a bunch of turnovers. There were some games where I think Winnipeg especially took it to them and made sure that they knew who was in charge, who ran the prairies. And right now, unfortunately for Rider fans, Manitoba is the leader here as the Bombers run the prairies, and that is just a big flip from what we had seen not even a few years ago. So just keeping things closer for this offense that will have Trevor Harris go out there and be healthy. Theoretically, that's going to be big as to play around with the quarterback spots a lot last year. We talked about that to death, so I don't really want to talk about that too much more, but Harris was brought in to be a quarterback that could help this team take a step forward. Now we get to see whether or not that's going to be the case going into this season, and then getting to switch back to those Argo roots with Mace. Maybe, just maybe, get to see a little bit of poaching here for Mace and his roots with the Argos, because we've already saw Pinball Clemens talk about the possibility that some Argos players could go over there. I don't exactly remember what he said, but you will see that where coaches, especially in the CFL, can kind of say, hey, we have some connection, we have some history here, why don't you come on over here, this is the amount of money we can give you. You already know what kind of fit we got, especially if they were in a role where they coach that player and say, you already know what kind of fit we got, you already know how I coach, you already know what's expected of you. That familiarity while also getting the contract maybe they're seeking to get could be big, as Argos obviously have a lot of money that they got to figure out too, with a big list of names you would like to keep, but with the way that the CFL salary cap is set up, that's just not going to be the case. So maybe a little bit of poaching. Maybe we joke about how the Saskatchewan should change their name to the Saskatchewan Argonauts at the end of this free agency period. And then finally, I would say that these two things are going to be so big for expectations for the team. The biggest thing, finishing better than 6-12. That seems like a joke, but if you fire one coach and then bring in another, and then automatically they have a worse year, it's just like, man, maybe the future is better set up with them, but at the moment it doesn't really feel like it, because if we take a step back in terms of wins and the next year doesn't really start off that well, then you're thinking, well, man, we were a 6-12 team with Coach D, now we're like a 4-14 team with Coach Mace. What is going on here? Now, I'm not really saying that that's the case, and I am excited to see what he goes out there and does, but finishing 6-12 or worse is not going to be something that is good here. And I think the beautiful thing is the CFL is getting back to more of that even schedule, so you have some of those East teams that you didn't get to play last year. Maybe you take advantage of some of those matchups and you win more games against some sides that maybe aren't as good. But yeah, that's going to be something where you could argue that it helps them out this year, whereas last year it was very divisional heavy, and that could be good. I don't know. I guess we'll see. And then the final thing being competing for the playoffs. I know that seems kind of tough, because you really know that two of the spots out west are probably locked up, and there is the possibility of the crossover. However, I did say, I think in one of my more recent videos talking about Edmonton, that I feel like the 3 spot out west is really up for grabs, and I'm not necessarily saying that the crossover is a lock to happen. So Calgary, Edmonton, and Saskatchewan are all going to be there in a dogfight for the final spot, theoretically, assuming that Winnipeg and BC perform up to their expectations this year. So you really have 3 teams vying for one playoff spot, and with Calgary, they might be able to outperform expectations or perform better than they did last year. Edmonton looking to take a big leap. They got McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Is he going to be the starter? Is he going to fix all their problems magically like it seems like Chris Jones is making it out to be? That is something to watch out for. But at the same time, for the Roughriders, they have a very pivotal game against Edmonton in week 1, I think, in Saskatchewan, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, if it's in Edmonton or Saskatchewan, go out there and win that game, because that does make your playoff chances seem a lot better, and you wouldn't have to complain and say at the end of the year, if we missed the playoffs, oh man, maybe if we had won week 1 against Edmonton, things would have been different for us. But anyway, yeah, those are just some expectations for Corey Mace for year 1. Defensively, see some improvement, try to retain key names in free agency, try to poach some players, not get beat by like 45 points, and then have a better record than the past 2 seasons, and compete for that final playoff spot. Easy, right? I guess we'll see. Anyway, what do you think of Corey Mace? And do you think this is going to be the right hire for the Roughriders? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, tell me how many wins you expect them to get on the season. Everybody, please make sure to stay safe and have a great night.